Okay, today is Thanksgiving, and we have company. My mom and I have a guest today, and I am working on schoolwork too before I go to work tonight at Walmart. Um, but I wanted to play a pre-recorded video that was actually published in 2014. It was between Peter and Poffo, and back then I was known as Chandler. And I'm using Streamlabs to broadcast this, and I don't know this software very well, so this could be a total bust. But I'm going to mute my mic and turn off my video feed here, and then I'm going to play a video file, which is about 2 hours long. And I may or may not be able to respond to chats, but maybe I can cover them in a future stream because I don't really have much time to work with today. So, without any more that needs to be said, I will get started.
I think it's starting up. Okay, I think we're live. So I'm Chandler Klebs, and to anyone watching this, okay, I'm with Peter Moriarty, Poffo Ortiz, and some dude named Ethan that I never met before. So Ethan, maybe since you're like new to this and new to me, you can tell me a little bit about yourself, what you're into.
Philosophy and working. And I mean, like I'm part of both Peter and Poffo's group, so I observe both. But I'm more like I identify as a biopan, but I still I think there's relevance in both, and I think both Peter and Poffo, like they like together, they're like an unstoppable force. I mean, that's what I think.
Unstoppable.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes.
Superheroes. We're like arch enemies, but we're also like Magneto and Professor X. That's it.
Yeah, I mean,
they work together. They work together to save the world.
Pages really give different perspectives on different emphasis on different topics. So it's really both. I'd recommend both their pages to anybody who could.
Good plug. Thanks, man. Hey, stand still, man. Quit moving around. Just look in the camera and relax. There you go.
I'm lighting a cigarette with my toaster. I ain't got a lighter.
Well, this is a very informal chat.
It's informal, but so Chandler, we wanted to if we could do this, we could try to keep this as focused as possible. If you're interested, why don't you play moderator, Chandler? Because this is kind of an interesting mix right here. You have the leaders of two codifications of pantheism, and you're a brilliant moderator, with your own show, and you do it so well. You play the neutral, you always kind of sit in the sidelines and listen, but then you chime in, and I would appreciate it, like if you could moderate for us and basically ask us questions about our philosophies, like the differences between them and stuff like that. Ethan actually represents sort of like our audience, even though he's coming and going. He is a member of both our pages, if you heard what he said earlier. He's a member of both our groups, and he kind of leans more toward me in terms of hard science and sort of my anti-theist take toward
hard
religion.
Science does not need to be anti-theist.
We're not debating yet, but
Not yet.
So Ethan leans more toward me, and he has a lot of questions for Peter's interpretation of pantheism and his philosophy. So again, Peter represents the Biosophy Facebook page and biotheism, and I represent biopantheism and the Biopan Facebook page. So if you can moderate, ask us questions, and play the.
Yeah, I'll probably ask you questions if I start to get confused, and Ethan might too.
Go for it. Ask us. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're pretty clear on it at this point. We've taken almost a year to have to come to our own conclusions as to where we actually draw our certain lines in the sand. So
we were lovers, and now we're platonic. Basically, we fought like lovers, and now we're like friends again. So
yeah,
because it's so passionate.
Yeah, okay, so I just want to start out by saying I already kind of know that both of you as sort of, both sort of biopantheists, although I think you said that Peter, he calls it like biosophy.
Biotheism and biotheism came first. Peter did a lot to inspire me to create my group, but he's been working on his formalization of this meta religion for years, and for me it's been about 3 years. So I'll let him talk the rest.
Well, there's a lot of complicated questions that are involved with pantheism by itself. So when we start going into differentiating between even further delineations of what this version of pantheism and this version of any kind of belief system gets into, we're already dealing with the difficulty of even understanding for many people what pantheism is by itself. Many people who are in pantheism community are familiar and embrace other traditions that help to describe their own beliefs. I come from that tradition that is more syncretic. I'm interested in promoting things that have to do with, say, for example, Taoism, Hinduism, which is esoteric Hinduism through Advaita Vedanta. I am a perennial philosopher in that I think that we can glean important truths from all of the traditions of our ancestors, and that they weren't so far away from our understanding of the modern condition as we sometimes presume. Just as we have today flat earthers and people who don't believe in climate change, in the past we had people who thought that the clouds were parting and that God could speak from beyond to us. And I think that there was always a mix of superstitious and fairly enlightened individuals, going back to Plato, who we know has grappled with some of the greatest questions and intelligibly grappled with them. And so I'm very much of a preserver of the past. And I feel like the Papho has had a lot of unpleasant experiences with traditions that he feels that need to be entirely looked at with some skepticism.
Scrapped. How about
and scrapped.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So like, whereas you're more likely to borrow existing traditions, like with religion or philosophy or something, and use that to explain your worldview, Papho would be more like someone just starting anew and just scrap the old, basically, and just start with a new thing without trying to reference all the other things.
That's correct. There's a few subtle nuances. Real quick, Chandler, is there a feedback, like echo or anything? Because I have my sound bar on. I don't want the sound to be distorted.
Right now, I'm not hearing any echo.
Like you're not hearing yourself, the reverb? Okay.
Right, I'm not hearing myself, and when I do, it usually freaks me out and I stop talking.
Okay, cool.
Well, let's admit that, I was reading a study fairly recently that said that a lot of people who have experienced traditional religion exhibit a lot of symptoms that are pretty much synonymous with PTSD. That this is a traumatic experience for a lot of people, that the programming that they were exposed to and the expectations that they were raised with were traumatic to their psyche and has caused them a need to separate themselves and really create that space of differentiation. I don't come from that same tradition. I was raised in a secular environment. We had some traditional, my grandmother was a Catholic, and I was exposed to some of that, but I never had that kind of forced indoctrination. I was always given a lot of access to nature and science. My grandfather was a well-established scientist during his day, and so I was raised with that ethic. And so I came to religion with a much more it was a less reaction against the negatives of religion as to say, wow, for so many years I dismissed this, but now I've come to learn that there were a lot of, just as if we were studying alchemy, how I dismissed all of alchemy for being a bunch of gobbledygook and gibberish, but now I've come to find through Jung and many other sources, not only connected to that, but alchemy was a real method for dealing with metals and creating, they were masters, many of them, of their craft, and they knew what they were doing, and it was formulas that we have lost our understanding of, but once we unravel them, the mystery largely dissipates, and we start to realize that these are methods that the ancients used that were in many cases more of shorthand than they were exactly superstition. And I think that that's a more generous view. In the same way, in terms of viewing purity versus impurity, I think a more generous view of impurity is that we can learn a lot of things by making mistakes or even doing things that are indulgences. You can learn a lot about your body by eating too much and getting stuffed and really hating life for a whole evening, and now you know why you might want to avoid those types of experiences.
I mean, but so I would say, why suffer? Always have to suffer the consequences, and
because you have to go through it firsthand.
Learn things in hindsight instead of taking someone else's advice or following the path of someone who's already been there. But okay, so let me speak a little bit on this. I wasn't raised as a Christian, but I was deeply an evangelical Christian. I was deep into organized religion, and I was a youth minister. I went to Bible college. Like Christianity was my entire life. So this is like a reality for me that I had to, that was deconstructed and reconstructed so many times over. And I basically had to pull myself out of the indoctrination and the brainwashing. Not that was given to me by family members or parents, but by my own pursuit of truth. I became consumed with biblical history and study of the Bible and just religion in general and spirituality in a Christian context. So losing my faith and coming out of that and being agnostic, and then really developing the courage to say no to all this dogmatic, sort of self debasement and the promotion of guilt and fear and all these different things. It was Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and all these guys, the new atheist movement, the anti-theists, that gave me the courage to step away from all that and finally balance my life out, because I was so extremely consumed with finding God's will and figuring out God's plan for my life, and just devoting my entire life to the ministry and to evangelizing and proselytizing and stuff. So as a pantheist now, I come from a completely different perspective where I only really care about reality. I only care about what exists, what's real. And I'm open to exploring the mystical experience and inspiration and synchronicity and the power of intuition and even the law of attraction. But I am sort of very much opposed to mainstream religions, especially the Abrahamic faiths. And I'm much more keen to just reject. Just flat out, just like you said, I want to start something new. I want to put pantheism on the map. I want to create, a codified form of pantheism where love and respect for all life is taught, and understanding and appreciating our place in the natural scheme of things. So I reject supernaturalism, and I think Peter does too. But he embraces mystical traditions that. And he has a reinterpretation. I would call it a reinterpretation.
Let me ask you this, Chandler. You dream, right? Do you remember your dreams fairly well on a regular basis?
Well, what's strange is I really don't remember my dreams, although I remember this weird dream where I was living in the house in the sky that was powered by a giant light bulb, and that was kind of fun. It's the same concept as a hot air balloon, but it's a light bulb,
Well, let me ask you this. If say you were in a dream and you were speaking to the light bulb that powered the mansion, and the light bulb conveyed really important, deep truths to you, would you wake up assuming that had to be false just because it was a light bulb that was talking to you in a mansion in your dream? Or would you actually assume that, in fact, maybe I was channeling some part of my own self that is beyond the symbols of the external form, but that truth is truth, and if it comes to you in a dream, maybe it says something to you that is really difficult to grasp at first, but do dismiss it outright because it's simply coming from a part of your irrational subconscious.
Yeah, see, but I see the value in dreams and symbolism, and I wanted to get into that. The idea of
but there's no difference. What is the difference between the values of those symbols and as they become expressed?
Because they get lost in translation. Because the idea of what religions represent, it's trying to comprehend and grasp the ineffable, and it's using mythology and symbolism to try and associate ourselves to understand these things, but at the same time with too much superstition and
I never said
unverified.
Look at your dreams as if they really were speaking to the light bulb. You were speaking to it. I'm only saying to continue, to maintain your normal set of skeptical,
But people don't do that. People
because
like get caught up in
if you analyze your dreams,
the
you
abstract.
don't need to establish that a dream is fiction. You understand that it was fiction, and yet it was fiction based on certain deeply.
If you're picking up on this, Chandler, what this is a parallel. We're kind of making a parallel to religion. That like with religious systems and organized religion and stuff, it's a lot like dreams. Like Peter is advocating that the abstraction, to hang on to the abstraction and the symbolism.
I'm saying that there's great value to.
I'm saying there is too, but what we see in the world today
can have scientific outcomes.
Well, what we see in the world today is not a healthy manifestation of the intuitive knowledge of our dreams. What we see in the world today is people literally going around telling people that what they dreamed was real and it's going to happen and the world's going to end and there's this place of eternal torment.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to what Peter asked me earlier. Like, would I dismiss that if the light bulb was talking to me in the dream? And here's what I would say is I would say that whatever truth it was that the light bulb was trying to tell me in the dream, whatever, I would probably want to evaluate it the exact same way as if some human had said that to me when I had been awake. Like I wouldn't, realizing if it's a thing that can be verified. For example, there are some things that cannot be verified or proved in any way, and those are the kinds of things I tend to dismiss, like can't prove it or disprove it, so I move on because it's not practical, But there might come an idea in a dream that somebody gets an idea for something and then later finds out for it to be useful or good or true or whatever, something like that, and that can change their whole life. So I wouldn't dismiss it.
What needs to be taught is the value of the language of symbolism. If we could teach people how to interpret their dreams or their mystical visions or teach people how to interpret their religions in a symbolic way, then I'm all for that.
There's an important part of that, which is to understand what some of the mechanisms and some of the aspects of our own psyche, like, okay, so these symbols represent, something we all have, which are mothers or children or parents. We don't all necessarily have children, but we all come from cultures and from parents and from nature that provides certain archetypal realities that we all confront. Now, it's one thing to say that, okay, well, we can go through and really understand them all, but that also lessens our ability to really sink deeply into those experiences. And just like watching a movie, by indulging in a willing suspension of disbelief, we can actually experience certain truths and realities without our judgmental factor kicking in. It's what I think is important is to always to believe and recognize that our skepticism will not flee us if we put it aside for a moment, and that we can actually put skepticism aside for a while, experience an irrational set of experiences and symbolic. I'm kind of at a loss for words here, but basically that we can immerse ourselves in the symbolic and mythic realm, and later on come back and be able to actually understand some of what that was without claiming it was all hogwash and woo, and then just throwing it.
Right,
like,
and
debating
so I think we're both against reductionism and the strict materialism, strict scientific rationalism, and if it becomes a limiting factor, because there is value in it, and I believe that, and I agree that we should use mythology, and we've spoken about this, Chandler, that we should use mythology and storytelling and these universal archetypes that Peter is mentioning, because in all religions, in all religious traditions, they are all true, as Joseph Campbell said, but none of them are literal. And that's the problem, is that people have taken these experiences, these stories, these myths, and they've literalized them, and they're literally projecting it onto their everyday life. And it's disastrous. You see where it leads with fundamentalism. So
Yeah.
I'm all about using myth and metaphor and storytelling and as a medium, as a way to express these universal sort of ineffable truths that are very difficult to express in other words. Like going back to the dream analogy, that like when you try to describe a dream, it makes no sense, because like the logical part of our brains are shut down, and we have the amygdala firing and all these, the abstract parts, the right brain, so to speak, is what's operating in operation. But if you're smart enough, you can interpret your dreams symbolically, and they do have meaning. They're all true. But if you go around telling people this happened, this happened, this happened in my dream, and believe it, that it's like speaking of it as if it was a literal thing, it's not going to make any logical sense. So I say the same thing about religions. No religions should be teaching that what they believe is the literal truth. They should be teaching ideals, and they should be teaching universal motifs, universal archetypes, using the universal communicating.
Yeah, like what I would say about that is that to get the lesson out of the Aesop's fable or the cartoon, or like the Dr. Seuss book, for example, what is the message? Like the message of the Lorax, for example, is not that this thing actually happened, that these truffula trees went extinct because there was this Onceler and the Barbaloot suits, the Barbaloots, and what all those other weird things had to go find somewhere else. That story literally happening is not the point. I mean, I got the point of the story was, hey, it's a bad thing if you cut down all the trees,
So let's get right to let's cut to the chase right now. I'm trying to create a real world pantheistic movement, and so is Peter, like a meta religion, a codification with pantheistic ideals. We're both trying to start sort of an organization, like a real world movement. I say, when you incorporate the pre-existing mythologies that dominate our planet and literally have caused so much atrocity and harm, to me, it's like going backwards. And I want to start from, what we know and what we can observe, and literally what is real, and that's nature. Like the miraculous, phenomenal, incredible, awe-inspiring qualities of nature. That to me is where our focus should be, and the myth and storytelling we can use to highlight and emphasize the extraordinary aspects of nature.
I don't disagree whatsoever. I just think that there are traditions and cultures that many people bring with them, that they're extremely invested in through their childhood, that we shouldn't exclude them because they come from a tradition that we see as being quaint.
What if they're killing the earth? What if they're killing the earth and they're torturing
then
animals?
They're not going to be drawn to
and
our
they're doing harm
in the first place.
If they're doing harm towards other life forms,
we don't need to alienate people from ancestral legacies that they were emerging out of, and to say that because we're of a secular Western mindset that we can go ahead and tell them they need to immediately jump on our train and immediately cast aside. It took many, many hundreds of years of deep cultural unrest for the West to be able to extract itself from the control of the church. And Christianity had an example like few other religions of what could happen if they took advantage of the people and forced their religion down the throat of the people for too long. And basically what happened was you had massive uprisings of the Protestants as well as the atheistic traditions that came up after Spinoza and so forth. And many people in churches died, and many people were, there was a backlash. And wait, let me just finish my point. Is that that's understandable. My point is that we don't need to expect that the rest of the world will immediately glom on or grok our Western enlightened perspectives right away. We have a much more vested interest in trying to communicate to them through a bridge of understanding, and that's basically where I come from. Now, yes, I would like to hear his response, but also I'd like to mention that as the person who is basically running the show, I would kind of like to have Chandler take some of the reins of where he feels things now can go. Because
as long as we're not boring, as long as we're not boring you, we're not boring you.
Yeah,
right?
you're not boring me at all. See, here's the thing about it is I feel what happens is like there are certain key things. Like I know that people are going to be attached to their religious traditions, obviously, because especially if they've been raised in it, like I was. I was raised in Christianity. It's not like they're going to quickly jump and become some weird some atheistic Western philosopher so I realize it takes time, but at the same time, I feel like the process kind of needs to be sped up. If you know what I'm saying, because I feel like there is, like, here's what I would like to do, guys, and I don't know what I'd like to hear your guys' responses. Both of you may have different opinions on this, but basically, there has to be a way of bypassing certain topics, because I feel like a lot of time has been wasted on the debate over the existence of God. For example, and I know a lot of people think it's an important debate to be had, but honestly, I think it can be bypassed by thinking about, well, let's say that God does exist. Does that God order you to kill animals either for food or as burnt sacrifices? And if yes, I'm not worshiping your God, even if it does exist. So let's focus on what's right and just forget the gods, even if they do exist. If they're wrong, that's one approach. For example, focusing on ethics and respect for life, trumping whether certain religious doctrines are true or not. Because I do think there is a matter of priorities, if you get what I'm saying.
But let me respond, and don't interrupt me, please. What Peter wants to do is a reinterpretation. If I could summarize it, simplify it, dumb it down.
True.
Okay, well, this is my opinion, so let me talk. I feel like what he wants is
your opinion about me.
What he wants is a reinterpretation of the ancient traditions and of religion in general. What I want is a reevaluation of reality. I want to explore and I want to understand the numinous and the transcendent, the religious experience from a completely naturalistic perspective. Like I want to teach biology and science and physics and astronomy and cosmology, and I want people to be just as enthusiastic and inspired and liberated and completely motivated by the real world. I want to shift the emphasis and the focus away from supernaturalism, away from myths and traditions, away from the ancient paths and these systems that have not served humanity, and put the focus and the emphasis on our biology and our life and our existence in this world, and the tangible reality that we're faced with every single day. That we all need food, we all need water, we all need shelter, we all bleed red. Like, it is our biology, and I learned this from Peter. It is our biology that binds us, and it's the most important, absolutely the most important fundamental thing. You were talking about ethics. Environmental ethics should be the basis for every religion, every form of spirituality. But that's not what religion's the business of. Religion's the business of pacifying and placating people's emotions and comforting and providing placebo and answering the unanswerable questions, essentially, by making shit up, by basing it on stories from the past. And I'm saying, like, let's explore the real story, the story, the history of evolution, the history of our cosmos. That's the most amazing, incredible thing there is.
Why do you think that there's a difference? How can you say that the history of our minds and the history of our beliefs is somehow extracted from the history of our biological?
Because those observations that were made,
the same process.
they won't be able to hear us with both audio. Those observations that were made by people who were uneducated, who were not informed about the world. You're saying that those mythical traditions were made at a time when we didn't understand how science works, how life evolved.
I'm saying that we were constantly learning more about how the world works, and that in that process of evolution, that religion became the manifestation of our intellectual evolution, of our best understanding of how these things work at the time, based on the conceptions that people at that time were able to even have.
I think there were aspects
they didn't have a body of work called science on which to found reasonable conclusions.
There were aspects within each religion that constituted the highest ideal and the aspiration toward ethics and morality. But every single religion was flawed on a fundamental level because we literally did not have the holistic perspective that we have now. The holistic perspective, understanding that we're living in a systems model, in a like an organismic universe, as Peter would say, and they didn't understand that. So there was this duality, there was separation, there was division, there was distinction. We have moved beyond all that, and we understand and we know now that we're all connected, that all things are interrelated. So starting with the knowledge we have now, let's create something that can benefit society, benefit humanity, and guide us, lead us into the future of sustainability, to the survival of our species. We have to institute a biocentric philosophy, and that's what we both represent, but we have different approaches on how to deal with the public, how to deal with the masses.
Well, yeah, now I do want to hear Peter's response to that, but I have one more thing to say before that. Now, what I'm hoping, guys, is that as much as you have some disagreements, I'm hoping that your different approaches can be used effectively on totally different audiences, because there are going to be some people who are drawn more to Paul's approach, but then there are going to be other people who are going to go more for Peter's approach. And I have a feeling that it will be like earlier, like we were talking, there's a little bit of a difference between someone who's raised in a particular religion, for example, as opposed to someone who comes at from a secular worldview, how they view religion. And what I think is that those who are raised with a certain religion, it's harder for them to give it up. And so what I think is Peter's approach may help them bridge the gap from where they are at in their beliefs to something a lot better. Whereas other people who either are already very secular or who have already gone through a process like I have, where I rejected religion outright, means that I am obviously biased in favor of Pafu's view, but I haven't heard all of Peter's view, so I'll let him educate me on this and our audience.
Talk about biotheism in a simplistic way, if you can.
I could go to a couple of important sources. A quote that sticks out of my mind, is from Francis Bacon, who says that a small amount of science will lead the mind to reject the idea of God, but a large amount of science will bring the mind back to God. In a similar way, a person who I have high admiration for is Isaac Newton. And most people don't realize that, in spite of the fact that Isaac Newton was one of the greatest presenters of the natural laws of the universe to humankind, that he was also a dedicated alchemist, and he was obsessed with a number of alchemical solutions to finding the philosopher's stone and answering the truth that would bring all science and religion into one sphere. And I think that basically dismissing the idea that mysticism and science are that they are compatible is where I really think that's one of the stronger basis for how I would say biosophy and biotheism is different from biopantheism, is that I'm not saying that mysticism in itself has value. What I'm saying is that the exploration of our intuition, and I will go back to the school of Einstein. Einstein has repeatedly said that it was his intuition that provided him with his greatest scientific discoveries, and that this is the method by which that we actually explore the real terrain of the human psyche, because science itself is its own set of dogmas and expectations and beliefs that, in the same way he was raised as a Christian and he ended up rejecting some of the conclusions that Christianity wanted to foist upon all of us. I was raised in the scientific tradition that was reductionist and materialist. And I came to the decision to reject that kind of fundamentalism, which is saying that the universe is not a magical place. Now, what we use as the word to define what is magical is this term magic. Magical is like pantheistic. It does not mean magic. It means like magic. And when we see birth and we see the vast array of different species that have emerged, it doesn't require the belief in a supernatural deity to see that what has emerged here is far beyond our rational capacity to explain. And it is in many ways better or more accurate to describe it as not magic, but magical or quasi-magic in its effect to instill within us a sense of awe, of wonder, of respect. A reductionist has a refrain of constantly going back to, well, this is really based on this simple mechanism of this valence canceling this valence and this other valence attracting another valence, and it's really all just a question of atoms spontaneously forming. And okay, there may be a truth to that, but when atoms spontaneously form into living beings that feel and create holidays and love their family and have strange relationships with their pets, this is something that goes into and when I say relationship, I don't mean very strange. I mean relationships that are not natural for humans to be living with dogs and cats, for people to really have love for their animals that go beyond simply, it's like they're part of their family. That's not the way that nature was designed. You don't see that. It's an aberration, in other words.
But nature is designing that through human beings. We're learning that altruism and symbiotic relationships are beneficial to all involved.
But the mechanisms that many scientists point to consistently to say that things are cut and dry and we have it all figured out, it's a way of robbing the world of its magical, not magic, but it's magical.
Reductionism robs, it robs the experience of the value of the experience itself, of the emotional experience.
Right.
I agree.
If you listen to music, you could have somebody tell you that these notes react to this note, and even the vibration creates this sort of dissonance and this harmony. And you could narrow it down to all the factors, but will that explain love in the song? No. Will that explain saying why this food to me means more than anything? To have that experience and say, this is Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Since you brought up food, I just have to interject here because I love food. But see, here's the thing. Now, basically, here's how I view, mystical or spiritual people as being like the people who are eating food and say, this food tastes good. And then I see the scientist, materialist type of perspective being the person who says, it goes into all the details about your taste buds and your tongue, and then they go on to explain the whole digestive system and the evolutionary advantage of having the food taste good. But the other person just responds like, yeah, it tastes good. That's what it's like. These two different approaches.
So I would argue that understanding how things work and understanding sort of the biology behind these interactions with the rest of the world actually bring more value and more meaning and
at the right time and place. When you're eating and savoring the food, you don't want someone to describe the chemical apparatus that is causing.
I wouldn't mind, honestly.
I don't mind either, but I think that there's a time and place, and there's a time where it's like that there's a scientific truth that we should not dismiss. That is, this food tastes good. There's a scientific valid truth.
I'm not arguing for you to talk about.
I didn't say you were.
So I agree, but what needs to be done away with is superstition and the magical thinking in psychological terms that goes along with the experiences. There is such a thing as the numinous experience, the transcendent experience, and what needs to be dispelled and done away with is the superstitions and the mythology that gets projected onto it. Like, we need to just experience the transcendent or the extraordinary and embrace it for what it is, without drawing or looking backwards to these pre-existing, or without any predetermined bias, or always filtering everything through the lens of Christianity, or saying, oh, that's why, isn't God wonderful? Isn't Jehovah wonderful that he created this waterfall, that he created this sun? Why can't we just say, no, that sun is wonderful, that waterfall is beautiful, and all these things are nature? So again,
because Jehovah doesn't necessarily represent the sun; it may represent something.
It represents their anthropomorphic personified explanation for why all these things are occurring. We should teach the real explanation for why these things are occurring, and we should watch a child without any kind of cognitive bias, and they are in love and infatuated with reality, with life, with everyday, even mundane things. That's what we need to promote and sort of
But Jehovah
cultivate.
doesn't just represent a sun god; he represents also a father deity, and everybody has fathers, just as we all have a sun in the sky. We also have fathers, we have parents, and those are roles that we assume as a child, that we are not only born into the world weak and frail and vulnerable, that we cannot determine for ourselves as children all of the life lessons that our father would pass along to us. And in some ways, it makes sense to say, you know what, I don't know if this is true or not, but you know what, until I grow up and know this for myself, I can trust in authority. Now, I'm not saying to do that. I am anti-programming. I'm all about, for adults, to question their programming, but there's a certain point as a child, you have no chance. You don't have a chance as a child to question the programming as you are being programmed, because you don't understand that process. So what I'm saying is that people at different points in their lives are ready to question, and at that point they should. But we should also understand that at some points in many people's lives, they are still similar in many ways to absorbing the world like children, and they are not ready to question.
Not in a good way.
They're not ready to question every aspect of every piece of wisdom that is handed to them.
I want to bring back the wonderment and the awe that children experience, but do away with the conforming, sort of submissive nature where there's no inquiry, and you don't question authority, and you don't ask questions. That needs to go.
I think that this is the funny thing, is as we're talking in this conversation, I feel like it's getting more and more confusing, because in so many ways we're actually really agreeing, and I know that we're not agreeing on everything, but I think I was hoping that this conversation could be a way that we could clarify fairly concretely what is the difference between what he's calling biopantheism, what I call biotheism, and what this common thread of pantheism, as well as scientific naturalism, which I would say, as a determinist, that you fall into being, probably, especially on that side. Is it becoming clear, at least to you as an
ask us questions if you want to lead and guide and direct it a little more. I do want to talk about symbolism and paganism.
We should keep our responses to a minute or less.
Okay.
Yes,
remember what he's saying right now. Remember this.
Yeah. See, here's the thing, guys. You guys really agree on a lot, but this is interesting because, see, I feel that there's so much like, for example, parents, like you said, children are curious about the world, and everything seems wonderful when they're new to it. Well, not everything seems wonderful, obviously. Some things are bad, obviously, things that cause them pain, but they're all curious about things, and they're going to ask their parents questions, and those parents, unfortunately, play such a huge role in how educated that child becomes, because they may be the type who says, oh, well, because God wanted it that way, that's why the sun and moon does it, that's why the grass grows, like, oh, God wanted it that way, and they just do that for everything until the kid just quits asking questions and just figures God's the explanation. And then you might have another parent who wants to explain everything to such a point that they're indoctrinating the kid in a different way. Instead, I think a balanced approach, and you guys may both agree with this, is to let that curiosity, that natural curiosity that children have, stay there, and let them learn and answer questions, but not over answer. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's a somewhat balanced approach.
Get to them at the level that they're at and what they can comprehend and how much they can take in. Sure.
And I think that applies because basically Papa and I are saying much of the same things, but we're speaking to different people who are coming to this information at a different place in their life. And to some people, I think that my message is more appropriate, and to others his. And I don't deny that. I tend to fall towards the side of being more inclusive, towards the side of embracing certain aspects. You know, I love certain things of purity, and purity matters to me, but I think that we protect purity by actually embracing impurity in some ways. As counterintuitive as that might seem, for example, in terms of my philosophy is very much about the idea that we show our, basically, I say a lot of times, moderation in everything, including moderation. Be skeptical towards all things, including skepticism. The idea is that indulgence has its own purpose. Making a passionate mistake can be one of our greatest learning methods.
I agree with all that. So we don't want to get
it's not always a mistake either.
We don't want to get too personal, but like, let's just say Peter supports and promotes recreational drug use. I do not. I don't support any drug use unless it's absolutely essential, absolutely necessary.
We're speaking in terms of like entheogens.
Keep us. Remember to interrupt if we're talking too long. So Peter supports entheogens and using entheogens, using drugs or psychedelics and hallucinogens to stimulate the mind to reach altered states of consciousness. I have reached altered states of consciousness. I experimented a lot with drugs when I was a teenager, and I got a lot of incredible messages from it, and it opened me up and made me the incredibly analytical and perceptive person that I am. But at the same time, it completely confused me and it screwed me up, and I saw the damage that was done in my life to my body and to the people around me and my friends. So I have a very I'm straight edge. I have a very straight edge mentality when it comes to overindulgence or using substance abuse. Essentially, I just had a friend.
So in other words, it was that passionate mistake that became one of your best lessons, like he just said, like Peter just said.
Sure. So the fact that we're sure, I'll concede to that, but the fact that we are leaders trying to start a movement, what we need to represent, I believe, is self-discipline.
I don't represent debauchery and just wanton drug use.
But the problem is the people who do engage and do all these things and abuse substances and have addictive personalities will gravitate and will find that as a justification because you're more tolerant of it. That's the problem. It's never
nature.
It's never so much.
You're a biopan, shouldn't you embrace everything that
really the naturalistic fallacy coming from you?
And that cannabinoids are it represent a system in our bodies that have been there for.
Or maybe Peter likes to do these things himself.
No, it actually,
so he wants
it's
to
actually saying.
Keep it.
Okay, I just read an article that showed that the fact that cattle and so many of the foods that humans would normally eat, which included a lot of cannabinoids, was actually an extremely powerful anti-carcinogen and other anti-inflammatory influence on our diet. That when we made hemp illegal, that many of the animals that use this as a big part of their diet, and it's been proven that hemp seed is one of the most complete foods that exist in nature.
I have hemp milk in my fridge right now.
that
I don't
essentially
disagree.
that by making it illegal and putting a stigma onto hemp and cannabis has deprived us of one of the most healthy plants that exists on the planet. This is not about different altered consciousness. It's about the fact that we create demonizations and stigmas around certain natural phenomena. I think that's anti-pantheism.
This could take way too long, so let's try to keep it succinct. Chandler, go down the list. Maybe just ask us a series of questions, and with really short, brief answers. Peter, where do you stand on this issue? Papa, where do you stand on this issue? Peter, what I'm trying to say, that would give a better, because all of these issues we could talk about like forever, and we each have.
My recommendation is just to ask whatever it is.
So if you could, and we can help out, and I can mention a few things, but like quick answers, like this is the biopan stance, this is the biotheism stance.
Yeah, let me think what would be. Yeah, I want to ask like basically the most important questions that people would be asking,
Right.
Like I really like, for example, like when it comes to morality or ethics, I feel like that may be a central part, because how we should live, like for me, it would basically include, to a large part, not doing something that may cause, like, harm to yourself or others, which is why, for example, I really think alcohol is got to be the worst idea ever. Like, no one should ever drink alcohol, And so my thought right now, after listening to you guys, is that I get the feeling, and I could be wrong about this, so correct me if I'm wrong, that Peter probably enjoys alcohol because it gives him an altered state of consciousness, and it may lead him to some truth, whereas Papa would probably be more against it. So let's just use alcohol as an example. Where do you guys stand on that issue?
Quick answers. Quick. Go ahead.
I think that one of the biggest mistakes of Islam is promoting the idea that a small amount of something that is dangerous is equal to a large amount of something that's dangerous. And based on that logic, they proscribe or make illegal, or at least they basically are against any alcohol use. I find that to be extremely demonizing, and I think that it's not only not fair to the reality. Look, don't talk about this. I'm still under 15 seconds.
Is that the 15 seconds?
The point is that
I think it's longer than 15 seconds.
You create more problems by demonizing this and claiming that a small amount of something is, if you give yourself a poison in large amounts and it kills you, that a tiny amount of that is equally bad.
Is alcohol healthy biologically?
Yes.
Yes or no, Chandler? The answer to that question, that's where I stand.
Right, and in small amounts, alcohol has been proven on many cases. People are centenarians that lived over 100 years that say that
psychologically and emotionally, it has.
The science is in on this.
It has a calming.
In this case, I am right, but the science is in that small amounts of alcohol are better for your cardiovascular health, better for your circulation. They're better for your sleep patterns.
There are 6 cans of Heineken in the recycling bin right now that Peter just drank.
And what's Heineken?
Because we're not talking about small amounts.
That's a personal.
We're not talking about small amounts.
You're creating a completely different. This is not a scientific approach. What I just said was scientifically researched information.
But what we represent.
And then you bring into something else about how
what we represent.
I'm so inebriated.
He's not drunk.
That's showing me a weakness in your own personal argument.
It's my weakness. I am not. It's not a personal attack. I'm making a point that you can say small amounts are good for you, but if that's not what you're doing, then it's irrelevant. See?
In nature, it's been proven time and time again.
Well, yeah. See here.
Poison would be very good for you.
I believe in moderation and balance. I believe balance and moderation in all things. In all things. If you are in extreme pain and you're psychologically disturbed, it even says in the Bible, give beer to the king, give wine to those who are perishing. There's that advice, because it's the idea of anesthetizing pain. I can understand the idea of anesthetizing extreme, severe emotional pain, but when it becomes recreational and it's continuous and it becomes addictive,
well, I'll say this right here
that's what
now,
makes it bad.
is that when it comes to recreational use of something like beer or wine, yeah, I definitely stand for that as being, and I respect the differences of opinion, and I respect your desire to keep that out of your life and so on. But when you said that I might support alcohol because it's an altered state, it's really because it's more of a, not an altered state that is expanding my consciousness as much as it is. It's a comfort zone. It's simply a stress reliever. And I'm not claiming that, okay, we could go into Bacchus and Dionysus and what the representation of that symbolism and the depths of that religion. And I'm a very, that's something that is very important to me. However, I think that when it just simply comes to something as simple as beer or wine, that to claim that it is something that is so dangerous and should be strictly prohibited, or
I never said it should be prohibited. I never said it should be prohibited, but I am not promoting. Prohibiting and promoting are two totally different things.
Well, I do.
So let's bring in context.
Beer and wine to me are part of life that represent some of the best go-to means of celebrating the natural legacies that we inhabit and that are part of normal life, that even animals such as horses and bears will eat fermented fruit. This is part of nature, and therefore, to my mind, it is nothing but something to celebrate.
Okay, so my take, so that's good. So he's representing his stance. Let me represent my stance just by saying a few words. My last roommate was an alcoholic. I went through hell trying to get her out of here because of what she put us through, because of her addiction, and because of me trying to help her. I've lived with alcoholics. I've my entire life. I've gone to AA meetings with friends. I've lost friends over it. I have friends who have recently died because of their drug use. So I'm coming from an entirely different perspective, where I am seeing the consequences because of people's emotional imbalances, because of the state of the world, because of the stresses of society called structural violence or whatever, that how substances are the go-to, as Peter says, can become completely self-destructive. So I'm seeing that aspect of it. So I barely drink. If I drink, I'll drink Guinness or something. I'll have like one or two, but I can't remember the last time I got drunk, and I don't like the way it makes me feel. I don't like things that alter my consciousness or dull my senses.
What we run into here,
and physically, I
need to respond, is that what we're running into here is that you have a solid point about the dangers that many things in this world represent. But it is not my philosophy that we should put a wall between people and all dangers, so that they don't submit themselves to some of the realities.
Because I never said we should.
I didn't say the example. No, but I didn't. That's not my point. My point is saying that by suggesting that the danger is strong enough that we should promote people to not experience that for themselves, we are saying that is a danger that people cannot handle. It is beyond their. Not you. I'm saying that leads down the road to prohibition.
Orwellian nightmare.
Peter is very weary of putting on people certain kind of limitations, and it's not Orwellian. Go to any part of the Islamic world, and you cannot get a beer. You cannot responsibly enjoy any kind of things. People in Singapore are killed because they're these are powerful. The war on drugs has had a powerful negative impact.
Okay, look, this could go on forever if I just let you two continue. So this may be one of those times I'll have to interrupt. Okay. Because okay. So here's the thing: is yes.
One question.
Okay. There clearly is a huge disagreement on this issue here, and I think you guys have to resolve this in a sense, because look, we know what alcohol can do to people. And I know that, like, you talk about moderation and balance, and yet alcohol is one of those things where even a little bit of it takes away people's inhibitions, the things that help keep them in moderation. So of course, obviously, I'm on the side of prohibition, you might say, as far as that comes. But yeah, this is a difference in philosophy between you. Is that like Peter seems to, this is my perception based on everything you've said, is he seems to have this idea of allowing people to make mistakes so that they learn from it. But then at the same time, things can be so dangerous, as Pafo has pointed out. And then I would expand on that there are mistakes you don't learn from that get you and others killed, and it's irreversible damage. So this is serious stuff, and just the alcohol issue alone, I think we really hit on a nerve of huge difference between your two approaches. And of course, this is an ethical thing, but
Okay,
yeah.
let's move forward. Let's move forward, because I would like to go down the list, and I also want to, qualify.
There's not enough time for that. I think this is a good issue to stay focused on.
Then a few other issues maybe, but I'd like to qualify. I never said anything about prohibition or restrictions or limitations on the choices people make. I am trying to start a philosophical movement. I'm trying to create an organized biocentric movement, and part of that movement is the idea of balance and holistic health. That's all. So what I'm just speaking from what I'm representing is health and sustainable living, and essentially the opposite of self-destruction.
I'm promoting the same thing, but obviously, look, you guys are not my preferred audience. But just as I lived in Israel not that long ago, and one of the things that I found, and I do not have a preference for Judaism over Islam. I'm very familiar with both the traditions, and I think that they both have a great deal of important things to offer. But one thing I saw that was different was that the Judaic perspective on alcohol was that it was part of their tradition, and that they actually had holidays where the celebration of the inebriation with your fellows and taking care of each other, even though that you're in a state of these are like for Purim, basically the holiday of Purim. One of the mitzvahs, the things that you are instructed to do, is to drink with your friends until you no longer recognize them. That's actually expected of you on a yearly basis.
They wear masks.
Now, obviously, that's not necessarily something that I myself, there could be. That's not something that I could see a lot of gray area in promoting that. But what I do promote is the idea that we take many of the sacraments that come from nature, some of the processes such as fermentation, which was greatly embraced by the Christian tradition, and see what that symbolically represents is that these states, it's like the bacchanalias, where we are entering into this realm of the irrational, that we're putting aside so many of. It's necessary for balance. I believe that basically this is all it comes down to. It's not that alcohol is not terrible. It's not that many drugs are not obviously terrible lures, and that will pull you in and take away your ability to resist, and that they can destroy you. But I think that's the price that we pay for liberty, is the ability to have access to that which can hurt us, for us to decide and to test our own inner we have to rely on our own inner willpower instead of having that forced upon us from an external source. And that is absolutely at the center of where I stand. And I think that also, just to cap this off, we enjoy our holidays, we indulge in some things on our holidays, and that's part of what a holiday tradition is to eat a little bit more than we normally would. And we should have holidays that do the opposite, that where we eat less. We should do times in our lives where we go without a lot of these indulgences. But I think that the indulgence, as well as the abstinence, they're both part of the balance.
Okay, I don't think that indulgence is ever a good thing. I think indulgence always leads to gluttony and fixation on pleasure. Okay, so let's move on. Want to ask another question?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we'll move on to something else that's important, because let me think.
Taylor, if you were to here, let me try to frame this. If you were to become a biopan and say you want to join,
I'm not trying to convert you to my.
If you want to, I'm not trying to convert you, but this is part of the exercise. If you were to join my group, join my movement, say make this your religion, philosophy, religion, okay, essentially think of it like that. Like think of it like, okay, this is what you're teaching and promoting. What does it say about this? What does it say about that? So you just follow that. Like if you were getting ready to join a religion, you want to know everything about it, right?
Well, yeah, that's true, and of course, it's hard to put myself in that mind, but I'm gonna really try here.
Yeah, or a philosophy, a philosophical movement, put that way.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, the top, like for example, for me personally, I guess the top questions I would ask would be about, you know, does your religion or your movement fully support veganism as basically the correct thing that must be done? That would be one question I would be asking.
I would say that veganism is absolutely the natural progression or the natural consequence of a biocentric attitude, respect toward all life, recognizing all life is divine. Basically not eating animals, not exploiting animals, not torturing and murdering millions and millions of animals is a given. It's a no-brainer to me. That doesn't mean that the vegan movement itself is the answer to everything, but right now it is the answer to climate change. It is the answer to
It's part of the answer.
it is the answer to slowing down the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse gases. It is the answer toward. It is a path toward a more compassionate world, because the entire movement is based on compassion and respect for life. Now, some of the problems within veganism. The other thing, last point, obviously, it is the healthiest. I believe it's the healthiest path to take is not ingesting any animal products, any animal secretions. I don't believe our bodies are physiologically designed. We're not meat eaters.
Many people who rely on meat. My sister, for example, who was she had a lot of issues with her health and was a vegan for a number of years. Found that. Once she switched back to having a certain amount of meat, that a lot of problems went away.
I would say that there were other things, other nutrients and vitamins she wasn't getting. She wasn't eating a healthy balance. Then she wasn't eating the right vegetables.
So right, maybe, but many people find that a vegan diet is less healthy for them based on their normal.
It's absolutely scientifically proven that there is no need to ingest meat or animal products. But let me move on. So
well, I mean, you are really concerned about timing.
I'm trying to. You're interrupting me. Now I'm losing my train of thought. It's a movement. It's a movement in the right direction. It might not be the answer to everything, and there are problems within veganism, like the misanthropic attitude of hatred toward humans. We become so enraged and incensed with the violence and the cruelty toward animals that we end up hating our fellow humans for it, and that's not a good thing. And there needs to be balance there, so that we love and respect other primates, other Homo sapiens specifically. So that needs to be addressed. But absolutely, in terms of the direction, it is an extension of Biopan to be vegetarian, vegan, to move in that direction. Absolutely. I guess you want to ask Peter the same question?
Yeah, I'd like him to respond to that same question.
Quickly. Let me ask you a question. Are you a vegan?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question to you then would be: is the fact of your veganism something that makes it possible or impossible for you to work with somebody who might not be a vegan, who is also working to do a lot of positive things, and they may disagree with you and you may disagree with them as to their methods, but as long as they are actually interested in making the world a better place, reducing suffering, being more responsible, being more concerned with their own personal health, the fact that they need is not something that would stop you from cooperating or working with them, correct or incorrect? Is it that? How important is it to you?
Well, it's pretty important. Let me put it this way. Of course, I wouldn't completely refuse to work with somebody if they were improving the world in some way. I would try to work with them on that, as long as it didn't compromise me in any way, and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? But it's there does come a point at which it is a hindrance, and to the extent that however much the problem with a lot of people are great at improving the well-being of humans, but ultimately I do feel that as long as people continue to eat animals and their products and all the slaughter and torture that goes involved in that, aside from the fact that I really believe killing is wrong, absolutely, even whether there's pain or not. But see, what's the harm done to animals, as long as those people are still not non-vegans, always outweighs any good they do for the humans, because they're causing more suffering to billions of non-human animals. So in a sense, they're good. The good they do for humanity is basically a drop of water compared to the sea of suffering they're causing otherwise. So I think veganism is such a high priority. I hope I answered that right.
Oh, and we're still.
You sure you don't want to move on? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Because I just wanted to get through a lot of different subjects.
Okay. Basically, I think that veganism is one of those topics that can range in importance for somebody to say, okay, this matters to me so much, the injustice is so great, I've endured it for so long, and I've dealt with the explanations for so long, that when you come to me with an explanation that I've heard before, that I really can't work with you, and I can't really line my morals and my ethics into any kind of shape or form that you and I, we're gonna see eye to eye enough to cooperate. Now, that is something that I understand. There is a moral line drawn in the sand that for some people that matters to them that much. And in that case, I do think that kind of mentality and that kind of person, as much as I support much of what it is that they represent and believe in, they are definitely going to be better off working through a system that is like biopantheism than they would with biotheism, which biotheism is much more open to individual interpretation. It is not about judgment of others and what they're doing and too much worry and concern about what others are doing, as much as it is concern about what we ourselves feel comfortable with. And so if people do feel that this is a bar that is it's a litmus test for them, then I would definitely recommend that they stick with something that is more connected to Pafo's presentation and approach than mine, which is really about the idea that I don't care whatsoever what somebody else who I'm working with in the moment thinks or feels or believes. In that moment, I can work with them temporarily and find them to be, completely, there's no barrier for us to cooperate in that moment because I understand what that moment represents, and that a judgment of other people's overall perspectives and beliefs, that's where I think that it's like I try to lay off and let people come to their own conclusions on their own time and space. That is an important differentiation, and I would definitely say if it's strict purity is an issue for you, then absolutely biotheism is not for you, because it's a lot about dealing with the gray areas, with the Taoist understanding of balance, and that black and white are constantly merging with each other.
I had a bunch of stuff to say, but I kept talking, so let me think. Hold on.
That's what happens in conversation. Other people get to speak their mind. I'm sorry, but that's.
I'm not concerned with the judgment or criticism of others. I'm concerned with the actions of others, especially when other sentient beings are involved. When we're talking about the actions of people harming other life forms, that's what I care about. So I judge their behavior and I judge their actions. What he's speaking of right now, just now, I'm remembering, just now, is how we communicate and how we interact with those people, and that there's a difference between the philosophy and the ideal that we're representing and the methodology of how to communicate it to the average person, the communication tactics, the relatability and stuff like that. And I'm absolutely 100%. I'm not gonna beat someone over the head with it, or it's not that, because that approach wouldn't even work. But obviously, if I'm speaking to someone, I meet them where they're at, and I try to direct them and point them to their own highest ideals and their own ideas about good and evil and right and wrong, and what is ethical, what is moral. I don't impose my own ethics or morality on other people. I try to lead them to a higher morality, from either where they're at, nudging them a certain direction or exposing them to the right information to let them make the decision themselves, like he was just speaking.
You're familiar with the show Dexter, right? Chandler?
I don't think so.
Okay, so Dexter he's a serial killer, and Dexter goes around and basically people who slip out of the hands of the law and continue to do terrible things, Dexter comes in and sets the scales of justice right by basically capturing them, drugging them, and then confronting them with their terrible deeds, and then he kills them.
He's a serial killer with a law, with an ethical code. Basically, he's a serial killer who only kills other killers, or only kills bad people.
Now that's one I haven't heard before.
Now, I think this is kind of interesting because it illustrates two perspectives that I think we're kind of both dealing with here. So somebody who feels that, okay, well, you're taking justice into your own hands, you're being a little bit, using the idea of judgment and deciding what is justice on your own grounds and judging and executing other people. In some ways, I think that's the danger that having these restrictive attitudes can often have, is that it's the danger of deciding that other people, they're doing something wrong, so therefore we have the ability to judge them. And then
that's not restrictive. That's defensive toward the victim. It's defensive toward the victim.
Yeah. See, here's
my point. Wait. Let me just finish, because that wasn't really my point. I'm saying that it could be seen that way, but on the other side of it is that it can also be seen that killing, and this is not about animals, this is about the messiness of justice in the world, is that sometimes that the act of killing may in some ways, again, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to not be confusing about this, is that sometimes justice is a less black and white thing, and that sometimes that killing itself is not always the worst of worst things. And I'm not this might have been a bad example, because I do not represent the idea that
right. Look, Peter, I get that you're not saying we should all be ethical serial killers or something like that, where we go around killing other killers necessarily, are you?
What I'm really trying to get at, and just to make a long story short, is that ethics and morals are not always so black and white. It's often very difficult to say. Like, for example, I know a lot of people who are very much, they advocate hunting. They are all about the empowerment and the sensibility that killing actually imbues to the warrior mentality. And this is not who I am. I've been a vegetarian since I was 17. But I'm saying that I have friends that I understand, that they see the connection, like an American Indian. There's a ritual in American Indian, some communities, that they will basically hunt down a deer, and then to connect with nature, they kill it with with a knife. There's no other weapons other than a knife. They extract the heart from the animal, and they eat the heart raw. Now, that could be understood as a type of absolute barbaric brutality. But we also know that Native Americans have a deep connection with the animal world, and that they have a strong spiritual connection, and that act itself, it's consuming the heart of the animal in a way that conveys a true sensibility of the connection. And yes, you could say that that's antiquated and so forth. I'm saying that what is just in this universe is not cut and dry. It's not black and white. What is good, what is bad, who is good, who is bad. These things are not really, it's not something that we can make quick judgments about. That to assess the full picture of each individual and what is moral for them is a far more complex thing that I think any individual or system can determine.
Well, here's the deal. I agree and disagree. Yes, it is complex, and we are not able to always look at the big picture and know for sure what the right and wrong answers are. However, I tend to heavily discourage this use of the whole, there's shades of gray. It's not black and white, because I've heard this from countless people. I tend to say that morality or ethics, whatever, is black and white, but that some of us have poor vision and it's blurry and looks gray. That's how I tend to say it. Because I unfortunately, like, I want us to realize that just because we may not be able to see the picture and know what's the right or wrong answer, what's good or bad, moral or immoral in every situation, doesn't mean that there is not a correct answer to the question. And so
murder can never be justified unless it's in self-defense or unless it's out of mercy and in a consensual way. I don't believe that killing is ever justified unless it's in self-defense to defend your own person, your own body from bodily harm, from injury, or of the sake for the sake of mercy, to eliminate, to ease the pain and suffering of another.
yeah.
There's never a reason. This is my take. I'm not arguing, I'm not debating. We're just saying that's his take. This is my take. My take is, I don't believe there is ever a moral or justifiable reason why we should take another life, unless that life form, that organism is directly threatening us. And in that case,
that seems very, to me, patriarchal.
There's never.
It seems to me very much about basically, deciding this idea of yes, right, no, wrong.
It's not. It's about protecting and preserving life. It's about putting life first. It's about saying that the organism.
But life is not about just death or life. Life is about quality of life.
I agree.
And therefore,
that's why I said
that in many cases, like mercy killing, for example.
I just said that euthanasia. I already
okay, but it's not just euthanasia. It's also like, think about this guy is going out and he's a child predator. And he's got a high, this is a sort of big deal in the news right now, or in conspiracy news, but basically child predators. And,
if he's a danger and a threat to someone else, then he needs to be eliminated. He needs to be quarantined. That's self-defense. Again, that's in terms of self-defense.
Well, I'm not really into the idea of summarily executing anybody. I think that we should, even terrible criminals, I think that we should not just kill them, but we should
rehabilitate, of course.
However, there are times where life is not so. Let me just sum up and say, you guys may be on the side of the black and white and the idea of bad vision creates gray. I believe that. Okay, well, that's his Chandler's view.
Right, that's what I was saying anyway. I don't know if Pafo is really on board with what I think.
My feeling is that there is no such thing as pure black, and there's no such thing as pure white, and that everything exists only as a shade of gray, and that this idea that there's one or the other is another type of visual.
Death is a part of life. Make no mistake, death is a part of life, and we're heterotrophic organisms, so we need to feed on other life forms. But if it's entirely possible, and not only possible, but completely practical to thrive and exist on a plant-based diet where we no longer have to hunt and kill and slaughter and take other life forms, or there's enough suffering and death and misery and struggle in the animal kingdom, since we're evolved sentient sapient beings, why should we add to that? We should be minimizing
the cruelty of every single case. The cruelty of every case that we take, and everything should be, as much as we can, dealt with on a unique one-by-one individual basis. As much as we can do that, that's a good thing. But you can't. In the real world, you're confronted by many decisions that, you're going to make a decision that will hurt a certain percentage, and you know that. But you make the decision because you think it will help a certain percentage.
Let's cut to the chase.
The reality is that life is not cut and dry.
Let's cut to the chase. Do we not wish to see people shift toward valuing life more? Do we not want to teach and promote a higher, deeper, even a sacred respect for the earth and for all of its inhabitants? That's all I'm promoting. That's all I'm about, is literally like embracing the life principle and honoring and preserving and protecting biodiversity and just the animal kingdom, us included. Like, actually, you and I, Chandler, disagree on this, because we're both fatalists, but you want to see the human race go extinct. I believe the human race has the greatest chance to protect and preserve life, and literally ascend in an apotheosis to ascend to become the divine God of myth and legend in our as we all unite and combine. I believe it's human beings who could potentially end all pain and suffering, but you're not as optimistic. So
Well, I'm not as optimistic because I've seen what humanity is like. To change my mind, do you know what it would take? It would basically take a world where humans were so, at least the majority of them were so moral, so good, so kind, so honest, and respected life. Like, look, it is theoretically possible if everybody accepted your biopantheism to where they have such a respect for life that ultimately they humans were doing so much good, and pretty much they probably would be all vegan in that kind of a world. In such an event, I would no longer be calling for them to all die out, but I don't have any optimism at this point that that will ever happen, because I truly think that this is idiocracy. People are becoming stupider and stupider each generation, and
Chandler, the vegan movement itself is proof and testimony of the opposite, that we are evolving at an exponential rate, especially with the advent of the internet and the spread of information, the information age, the age of technology. So movements like that, and the fact that so many people are crying out for animal rights and moving toward greater and greater levels of equality. So we're moving in that direction. We could destroy ourselves before we get there, absolutely. But this is a progression. We are moving.
Well, what I will say is that, of course, I'm inclined to want to believe you that we are moving towards that progression to where we will end up as if humans do evolve into the species that actually causes more good than harm on the planet, then yeah, maybe it's worth keeping them around. But in any case, there's no point in debating that, because none of us can actually predict that. But because I'm a person who generally doesn't like to take risks, not that I can make people all quit having sex. I would really like that to happen, because it would eliminate the human race.
I would like people to stop reproducing, stop making babies, but let's keep sex. Let's keep that pleasure, and let's be like the bonobos, man. And when we get stressed out, let's just go at it and relieve stress.
Well, if you can find a way for people to have sex with 100% certainty that nobody procreates,
sure, there you go.
Go have at it, man. But I don't know if anyone has ever been able to figure that way out yet. So
idealistically, so let's move on.
Let's move on and just say that if you're watching this video and you are uncertain that biotheism is not wanting to promote that we're very concerned with population issues and overpopulation, but copulation and having children is considered just a-okay. You can have as much sex and not feel guilty about procreation and be a biotheist, because my feeling is that it's not that we really have the right to go out and have like 8 or 9 children and just have as many kids as we want in this world. But I think that some of the greatest, if not the greatest, experiences that we can possibly have is to create life, to be part of the process. If we want to connect with nature, how do you connect with nature greater than to connect with your own offspring?
But it's not all about us.
It's not just all about us.
It's not all about us. That's my point. And having children at this point, with society in the shambles and the shape that it's in right now.
For everybody who embraces abstinence, and for everybody who embraces no children, I applaud them. But anybody who believes that there is a place for raising children and for enjoying the indulgence of sexuality, that biotheism is something that supports that.
I embrace the human experience, okay, but I embrace intelligence and wisdom and information and knowledge. And looking around at the world today, we do not live in an ideal world. I would never, in my in a
and
thousand
anybody who
years,
decides to not have a child because they don't want to
bring a child into
expose
this
them
world.
to that suffering, that's one thing.
That's it.
But to bring your child into the world, and I've actually had this conversation and argument with my mother, to bring a child into the world is not to just expose them to all the horrors of this life. You know, I had times in my life where I even yelled at my mother. I was like, "Why would you even have brought me into this world?" I
think
don't
we've
like
all done that at some point, haven't we?
Yes, but at another point, who doesn't say, well, you know, it's secretly, yeah, I'm really damn glad I'm here, and you know, if my parents didn't make me, I'd be gone. Maybe, you know, all I can say is that the reality of being alive is a blessing, and that no, we don't, you know, we shouldn't take that for granted and procreate.
I've never been glad.
Wild.
I've never been glad that I'm here. I'm trying to let my life and my lifestyle, and I'm trying to make a difference so that I can feel like I've accomplished something, and I've created something good, and I've left a legacy behind, and I've actually made the world a better place. Then I'll feel like it was a good thing for me to be here. Up until that point, when that happens, I know that I'm part of the problem, and I'm a consumer, and I'm contributing to it. That doesn't mean I hate myself, but what I'm saying is, you know, I wanna earn the right to be here, you know, through altruism and compassion and love and kindness and charity. So I don't think it should all be all about us, or be all about just our experience or our pleasure. I think we live in a world that's, you know, completely entrenched with billions of other animals and creatures.
Things. It can be both. For
to,
people who in their life, having a child brings them to the greatest truths of what it is that matters
does it
to
though?
them.
Does it?
If for them, that's not your place to judge. And if
my
it was for
cousin's
somebody
got 4
else,
kids, he's
that the
bogged down,
greatest
he's in
truth
hell.
is to not have children, that's your truth. And I embrace.
Not the greatest truth,
I
but it's
embrace the variety.
I say it's the only smart and intelligent thing to do at this point. Is
basically biotheism embraces your desire to remain abstinent and not have children, and it also embraces those people who are loving and good parents and who have gained the greatest.
Once the kids are already around, once the kids are already there, once they're here, then the absolute most important thing you could ever do is be a good parent. Like once they're already born, your life should be over, and it should be all about, like, bad parenting is the cause for all the evil in the world. So once the kids are already here, being a good parent, absolutely. But before that happens, and we each have the choice to make that choice, you know, we can use contraception or not. So like it boggles the mind that people don't deeply consider the responsibility and the consequences. So let's move on. Let's move forward. What else?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that was a very good exchange that we just had there, because I think there are fewer bigger questions than such things as the veganism, and then the should we procreate or not. I think those have got to be some very, very important things there. But let me see.
How about the value of mythology, maybe the value of symbolism? We can both speak on that briefly.
This is his show. Let him decide.
Well, okay, guys. Now I do have another question that I'd like to ask, and if you want to pass on this question, then understandable.
I'll answer any questions as long as we do it quickly and succinctly.
Okay, yeah, we'll try to make it quick. But how would your different perspectives view the topic of abortion?
I'll go first. I think it's the woman's choice. I think it's absolutely the woman's choice. I don't know when you can say, does life begin at conception? Or I've looked at the photos. I've seen these horrible mangled bodies of aborted fetuses and stuff, and it's atrocious. I mean, it is murder, but at the same time, there are situations where exactly what we were just talking about. You know, circumstances and situations where that child would end up, you know, living a horrible life or suffering, or people aren't in the financial place to raise and care for that child. Then I guess I would probably say, like, later term is more, you know, horrific and atrocious, but you know, I don't even know the lingo when it comes to this, but after the first few months or something, maybe the first month or whatever, before 3rd trimester or something, I can understand. But again, who the hell am I? I'm a man. I'm not going to carry the child. I'm not going to go through all this. Like, I think completely should be up to the woman. But then again, they shouldn't use it as a form of contraception, so that they're completely irresponsible. I believe in being responsible when it comes to everything. So don't use it like after the fact, to say, oh, well, I could just get an abortion if I get knocked up. Well, be responsible from the beginning, and then it won't even lead to that. Again, everything goes back to this: honor and respect life. If you respect life, then you won't live irresponsibly. You won't do the thing that creates life, and then sort of in hindsight say, oh shit, I got to take care of this now. You'll have that the sanctity of life will be first and foremost on your mind, so you'll make better decisions. That's my take.
Yeah.
I hope that answers it.
Yeah, and so I'd also like to hear Peter's response to that, and then we'll move on to another topic because I don't want to dwell too long on that.
Okay, so I'm glad that at least in this regard we can agree that because none of us are women, that really our say on the matter is going to have a relative. I think I'm hoping we can at least agree that the relative value of our input is not quite as much as if we were women who actually had to make that decision.
Yeah.
But I think that the issue is really not to abort or not to abort. I think that the question is whether we understand when we use the term pro-life. Pro-life is traditionally used to say that we are pro-quantity of life, that it's just like it's alive, keep it alive, keep it alive as long as we possibly can, and that's all that matters. This is not the issue here. The issue is what is the quality of life if you bring in a child into the world without the ability to give them the education, the opportunities, the nourishment, the love that they need. What kind of life is that? Pro-life needs to be a quality of life issue, not a quantity of life. And that's really all I have to say on it. My views are pretty consistent with the current laws of the United States, which give people the opportunity to have pro-choice, and also try to limit people's ability to make this choice after the fact. I'm very against the idea. I do consider myself pro-life in terms of quality of life. I think that an abortion anytime in the first 2 trimesters is acceptable, and the first trimester is absolutely preferable. The best thing is to not get pregnant in the first place, unless you were intending it. But yeah, I do think there's a certain point that you should have thought about this earlier, and it's no longer ethically. It's not my decision, and I'm okay with the laws as they stand. But there's a certain point where I think that you're doing the wrong thing by waiting too long.
I want to say something. I want to say something. Nothing that I stand for or am trying to teach and promote and instill in people has anything to do with laws. Like, I'm literally talking about on a societal level, on a civil level, a philosophy. A philosophy or a religion, whatever you want to call it. Like, none of this leads into any legal ramifications or has any legal bearing.
Not from you,
except if you were to pass a law that gives animals the same rights as humans, that all animals, that all life forms deserve love and respect, then I'm all for that. But everything else, everything that I'm about is teaching and promoting and instilling and organizing a philosophy on a civil level when it comes to every citizen.
Yeah, see, here's the deal. I absolutely agree with what you just said there, Papa, because here's the deal. I've tried my very best to stay out of politics and legal stuff, and even though my co-hosts of the other shows try to drag me into it, because I think ethics, morality, our respect for life comes first. That has to change before anything else will happen. So that's where it's at. So I don't really even like to have a legal debate. But the reason I asked is that is an important question, and I just think it's important for anyone who's considering joining a religion. They're going to ask questions like that, because I can tell you one thing: to a lot of people, me included, that's a pretty serious issue. It's a serious issue that does affect who people vote for legally. And I just got to say this: I think they had a lot to do with why people voted for Trump, because they believed his promises, which I don't think he was sincere about, of you know, defunding Planned Parenthood, and they believe him to be pro-life, even though that's a whole other thing. I don't want to get into Trump, but you know what I'm saying. I just want to point out that people's ethics, what they believe is right or wrong, whether it's about abortion or veganism or whatever, will affect their politics. So let's start with the ethics, and then hope that politics catches up with an expanded view of respect for life. That's the best we can do.
Backwards, but yeah, okay. Okay, so next, anything off the top of your head that you think of?
Yeah, let's see. There was something in my mind. Let's see if I can remember what it was. Well, okay, there is one other thing. Okay, guys, you know that I'm a determinist. You know that I do this show with this group of guys that we believe it's a pretty important thing in order to make some progress in the world, that people do understand that people do not choose their own desires. They don't choose their upbringing, all the things that make them what they are, and can no longer be ultimately credited or blamed for what they do, which is important, you know, because it has implications for how hostile we are toward people, whether we can truly kill them because we feel like they deserve it, which it often happens, or even if you do believe in killing someone, which I don't. There's a difference between doing it because to prevent them from doing future harm to others, or trying to torture and kill someone who, because you feel like they deserve it, even when it will not actually help anyone. Like finding like a modern day person who tortured Jews or other people in the Nazi Holocaust, and finding them on their deathbed when they're about to die anyway, and torturing them because you feel like they deserve it. So okay, so let me ask
That was a great preamble. You could have just asked us if we believe in free will or not.
well, yeah, but yeah.
But you're the moderator, so yeah.
Yes. Sorry for. I wanted to make that shorter, but I'm not good at that. So yeah. So okay. Two quick questions that I'll let you guys respond to. Do you believe in free will, and how important do you think it is?
I just want to answer real quickly. I'll answer first because it's quick. Chandler, we've already discussed it. You know that I don't, but I also don't. I can't see how it's relevant to the average person, because the average person is not rational and logical. I think it would take different approaches to change the negative behavior that you're talking about. So I agree we don't have free will, but I also think it doesn't really matter to most people. So I kind of see it as a futile effort. So you know where I stand on that.
Right. We have talked, but I haven't talked with Peter about that yet.
Right.
Okay, so let's just start out. I'd like to answer that question from what I consider to be a common sense approach. Basically, you mentioned an example of somebody who had done some terrible wrong, and that they had evaded justice for much of their life, but we discovered before they had died that they had done terrible things and that they had evaded justice. So in that moment, some people may assume, okay, so justice would be to make sure he felt some suffering and pain in his life, to make up, or at least to kind of be a teaching opportunity for other people. And I see that as completely, you and I, we completely agree that would be, it's absurd, it's asinine. I think that, creating more suffering in a situation where you're not preventing further problems, you're not preventing a wrong from being repeated, it's just piling suffering on top of suffering. And I tend to agree with the Scandinavian view of justice, that we should be looking for to get as much value out of the people who are here and who we're not going to rob them of their life while they still exist, but to try to get as much positivity that we can out of the situation, even if somebody has already done something wrong. I don't see any value of having it's not justice, it's revenge. I think revenge is the opposite of justice. That being said, I also think it's extremely important for us to always look at the causal reasons as to why it is that people are the way they are. Some of those reasons are not their own fault. Some of them are because they have repeated behavior that they were told they shouldn't repeat, and so they got ingrained in their own problematic habits. So absolutely, the understanding of how people got to where they are, the fact that they did not have necessarily full control of all of their faculties, that in some cases we consider people who are insane. They have reasons why it is they can't be held responsible for their actions. However, I do think that it's also common sense that barring this notion of insanity, that we do place people into a position of being responsible for their actions, whether they came to those actions through 100% conscious choice or whether they were pushed by subconscious impulses. And so it's not a question of whether we believe in these impulses. It's just that I think that the idea of determinism, I think the discussion of determinism is actually two separate conversations, and that it's been conflated into one conversation, but the two common sense conversations is A, causality. Do things that happen now, do they happen completely out of the blue, or did they happen by a chain of events that led us to this? And I think that causality is the basis for any scientific perspective. If you don't believe in causality, you are not a scientist. You are basically a theist, and you're not even a magical thinker. Your belief in the world is magic. It's not. It doesn't make sense. So I'm purely for causality. At the other side, then you have the question of choice and free will, and what I think that it's either determinism is either causality or the discussion of obstacles to free choice. And I think that if you talk about the obstacles of free choice, that's an obvious conversation. Anybody, we would agree that if you do not allow people to do what they're wanting to do, you've removed free choice. But if they can do anything they want, they have free choice. In that context, not free choice, but they have a removal of obstacles. So I don't even like to talk about free choice. I don't believe that the topic makes sense.
Well, yeah. See, and here's the deal. Obviously, I don't want to necessarily get too far into that, but I do feel that it is important, and I think we're agreed on the main thing, that revenge is asinine. I think you said, and I agree, because here's what it comes down to, guys: is the free will myth is what backs the religious notion of hell. That people go and burn in hell forever, not as a deterrent to keep them from hurting others or something, but because they deserve to burn forever. And that is the notion of deserving to suffer that the Christianity and Islam tend to back up that notion, and that is why the free will belief is harmful. But whether or not we agree on the terms about what a free choice is or how much sense it makes isn't that important. But I get the feeling that we're on the same page closely enough that we can all cooperate on this. But it is an important point, and it is part of one of my main missions. That and the veganism. Of course, I think the veganism is even more important, but I really think that I want to move us more towards a rational thing where we are scientists. We look at the causality, because that's how to fix the world.
Agreed.
Yeah, you can't be a pantheist and think that some people are going to burn in hell and other people are going to be, up in heaven. And even if anybody who believes it's obviously absurd, because if you truly were a good and godly person, how could you be in heaven and be playing your happy tune while you're looking down, because apparently angels can look down into hell, and seeing your children flayed alive?
That was part of the
you couldn't look at that and be happy, which means that you would be experiencing psychological hell in heaven.
Okay, two things. I just want to add two things and we can move on. I just want to add 2 points real quick we can move on. How about we just don't teach the myth of hell? How about we just stop teaching and eternal punishment and afterlife?
Hell isn't
2 points, really quick. We should stop teaching the religious nonsense. That would be a start, okay? And then the second thing is, it's not so much the idea of punishment and retaliation and vengeance and stuff like that, but we should teach people people the consequences of their actions. Life teaches us the consequences of our actions through the laws of cause and effect. And it's absolutely necessary to teach people that, you know, doing X equals Y, and this is what's going to happen if they're not realizing it. So I believe we should educate people in the most efficient ways possible to teach them that you know, whatever it might be, that harming others is wrong, and there are consequences, not just to the other person but to them, and it reverberates. So we should teach people consequences, and that's why there should be punishment, because we should teach them the consequences of their
But
actions.
that's okay. That's the same.
So that's just the subtle, the nuance to clarify it.
My
We all
feeling.
agree.
My feeling is that the difference between theists and us is that we can understand the idea of heaven and hell and things like sin as being individualistic descriptions versus collective descriptions. It doesn't work properly to say that your individual sin or your individual wrongdoing or right doing will land you in hell or heaven. It's more correct to say that our collective bad actions will land us all collectively in a future that is essentially synonymous with a heaven or essentially synonymous with a hell. And that really this idea that God is picking and seeing and weighing each individual part is not a true way of looking at it, because it's a question of the conglomerate of all of our actions, the conglomerate of all of our consequences, and the conglomerate of all, you know, whether that
And this is where we agree.
consequences are good or bad.
This is where we agree that the focus and the shift should be on this life, on this reality, on this world, and the consequences of our actions here. So here's where we agree.
Not just my life, but the life of our kids,
future generations, and future
this planet.
all of the organisms and life forms on this planet, that the focus and shift should be away from this individualized judgment and this fear tactic of, you know, you better do good, better do this, or there's going to be punishment in the afterlife. No, there's going to be consequences and punishment right now, and the whole focus should just be on this life and the physical world. That's my take.
That's an important thing, especially for people. Look, guys, this may be the first video that people see exposing them to something like pantheism in general, or your biopantheism or biosophy, whatever. No pantheist that I ever know of, just like no atheist I ever have known of, ever preaches the idea of hell or an afterlife of reward or punishment. We're all focused on this life, and that we are rewarded or punished in a sense just by cause and effect. But there is no hell in either of your particular brands of pantheism that you're promoting, and certainly not mine, because of course there's not really a name for the philosophy I have, but I've just been, you know, acting kind of as moderator and audience member for questioning you guys. And I think this has been really good, because I think we've covered some amazing topics. We talked about like the alcohol, we talked about the free will thing, we talked about veganism, we talked about abortion, we talked about drug use, and all sorts of stuff. And I really think this is great. Like, would you guys consider this sort of like being the pantheism podcast that you wanted to start producing?
This could be like a segue to it. This could be like the introduction for it. Sure. Like we could do this like once a week, and you can sort of interview us.
Yeah, I think it's doable. I really think this will be great. And what I love about doing these Google Hangouts is it records the audio and video, and then all we got to do is figure out a title and description for it, and then we can all share it so easily, you know. So it's really great. I feel like we really are coming to understand each other better, and which is the goal, really. I don't expect all three of us to ever reach agreement on everything, but I feel like we've got the main ideas. We all want to move toward respect for life. We don't believe in revenge against people, and we're focused on this life and being practical. So we agree on all the stuff that really matters, and this is good, because I really think that we've been able. Look, you see what we just did, and this is what I have to say is, we just discussed like 4 or 5 of like the most controversial topics in all human history, and we're still friends at the end.
And we don't all
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Because we're all in this together. We're all life, the universe, whatever. We're all connected, and man, we gotta get along.
We have our unique perspectives, but we're grokking on the important places where it really shows that we are of a similar strain of thinking overall. But these things don't just settle into an absolute. This is where I also feel that things are all different shades of gray. We're definitely all, I think, on the brighter side and not in the darker side of gray. But I do think that we have variations. That's what makes each of us strong in ourselves. Now, it doesn't weaken us to be different. It means that each of us appeal to and speak to an audience that is coming to the same set of ideas in just their own unique ways, from their own unique perspectives.
I think we should embrace the diversity within the similitude of our shared experience as human beings. That we have a shared ideal, that we have commonality of we have a certain ethical standard, and it's to a higher quality of life for humans and non-humans. That's the whole point right there.
Yeah, and let's not forget that like perfect is the enemy of good sometimes. If we all try to be all perfect and get everything just right, we'll never make any progress. But we're all trying to make progress in a sense. We're trying to move towards a more life-centered approach, respect for life, and being scientific. And this is good because in the end, that will lead to less suffering. If people are influenced by what you and Peter are doing and what I'm doing and what my other co-hosts are doing, people will be led away from some of these older tribalistic attitudes where we're killing each other over believing in the wrong God or something like that. And the whole health thing, like I think you alluded to earlier, it is an individualistic. It gets a person focused on themselves, like, oh, I have to believe this, I have to do that, not do that, otherwise I may go to hell, or it becomes about them, and it becomes like a selfish thing rather than a collective thing. And I want us to be collective, realizing how connected we are and how we affect each other. Because what could be more important? Because we're all stuck here. It's not like we're just one person on a planet all by ourselves.
Right, absolutely. Before we close, I mean, I'm kind of getting the vibe that you want to wrap it up, but we can give out our websites, we can give out our Facebook pages, and have people visit us and see our works and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, tell people where to find your stuff.
Oh, I'm on. Okay, just talking about Facebook, on Biosophy, the Facebook group, where we discuss every issue from theology to science to the unexplained paradoxes and how that relates to life.
Oh, that's a good. How do I top that? Okay, so I'm on Biopantheism, Facebook page, Biopantheism. Just type it in. I also have a website, my WordPress site. It's just type in Biopantheism, and you can Google it and it'll come up. And we can attach links to the bottom of this YouTube video as well. So,
yeah, that's right. If you guys just message me the links to your stuff, then I'll just copy paste it into the description. And what should the title be? Like a basic title and description should we include for this?
I mean, it could be like Biosophy versus Biopan, or
the Thanksgiving battle.
It really was.
Yeah.
This was very civil. You should hear us when we get heated, man. It gets intense.
I guess we have all the time we need to really think of a good title, but I do like the Thanksgiving battle of the
Battle of the Bios. Battle of the
the battle of the Thanksgiving battle of the Biopans or something.
Yeah, and Chandler, seriously, thank you, man. Like I don't know what you had going on tonight, but I do appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. I really feel bad that I haven't been able to engage with my online people as much as I like. But I've been so busy with work and I've been tired. So sure, I wasn't really feeling up to getting online doing this. But since I saw you were online, you sent that message. I asked if we could still do it, and I'm glad we did because this has been such a great talk. So I'm feeling inspired because formerly I was really depressed after getting all upset about people looking happy about turkey murder. I hate Thanksgiving. It's
We can make it something else, man. We can make it, Native American Appreciation Day. We can make it, make it Spinoza's birthday, and
yeah. Well, this will be a new Thanksgiving tradition for me. I'll remember you guys. Think of you guys and the great Thanksgiving talk we had. I'm thankful for you guys. Okay.
I'm thankful for you being a good moderator, a person who basically doesn't. I know that in many ways you may have sympathies that are inclined to Papa, but I think that you were a balanced and neutral moderator. So, I'm glad that
we're thankful
I'm thankful
for
for
Chandler.
this conversation and for you being available. Thanksgiving doesn't have to be all about the sacrifice of the animals. It can just simply. It doesn't have to be any kind of like fake history about American. It can be about just being gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude is an awesome thing, man. We should absolutely cultivate more gratitude and thankfulness. And,
Yeah, nothing wrong with having gratitude about the right things.
yeah, absolutely. And we should honor the bird instead of killing them and slaughtering them. We should honor animals. We should honor our fellow Earthlings. Absolutely.
There's many
Yeah,
ways.
absolutely.
That'll be for the next discussion.
Yeah, we'll have future talks. I think in future talks we may get a little bit more in depth about some other things, man. But this is a great start introducing you guys and your different philosophies. So I guess, are you guys ready for me to just end the broadcast now? Because I think we're done.
Sure, man. End the broadcast, and we'll name it later, and I'll give you the links and stuff. And if you want to just keep talking, keep talking for a little bit, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, sure. Okay.